In the multitude of counsel, there is safety. Welcome to the All Things Then podcast, a vision inspired by the truth found in God's Word and designed to inform, educate, and impact you in every way. My name is Akitunde Idowu, and I am your host. Join us as we embark on a journey to becoming a better version of ourselves. Hello everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of the All Things Then podcast, and I'm glad you could join us today. My name is Akitunde Idowu, and today we're actually discussing building positive habits and not burning out. And our guest today is Mr. Rotimi Ogunyemi, Esquire. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Akintunde. It's a pleasure being here, and it's great to have a listening audience as well.
All right, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Before we get started, I will actually read Mr. Rotimi's profile. So, Mr. Rotimi Ogunyemi is an information and communications technology attorney with years of critical experience in commercial legal practice and core expertise in handling legal issues relating to ICTs. He is the co-chairman of the Digital MBA, where he co-leads the efforts to redesign a robust digital identity ecosystem for the Nigerian Bar Association of over 120,000 lawyers, leveraging the national identity management infrastructure, and is the chairman of the ICT committee of the MBA section on business law, where he coordinates interactions and capacity building efforts for commercial lawyers in Nigeria on ICTs, assisting members spanning across telecommunications, entertainment, broadcasting, and information technology sectors in Nigeria. He identifies and addresses emerging legal issues driven by the growth of the digital economy. He is an adjunct faculty member of ICT Law, Policy and Regulation at the Nigerian Communications Commission's Digital Bridge Institute and a facilitator of the International Telecommunications Union (ITU) courses on ICT Law and Policy. Mr. Rotimi Ogunyemi is also the executive pastor and a teaching pastor at Christ Lovers Christian Center, Lagos. He is a graduate of the Association of Faith Churches and Ministers Bible School. He is passionate about developing leaders and helping individuals find purpose, direction, and meaning in their lives for the benefit of others and nation building. He is happily married to his beautiful wife, Ronke Ogunyemi, and blessed with 3 lovely daughters. We are honored to have you on this podcast today. And without further ado, we are going to dive right in.
Thank you very much, Akin. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. So I would start with this. We are talking about habits today, and we are actually talking about how to build positive habits as young people and how they can shape our lives and such that we build these habits and we don't burn out. Many times we set out goals at the beginning of the year, and before the mid-year, before half of the year or quarter of the year, most people are already wavering on their goals because they feel they can't meet up again. And that's what we'll be focusing on in this episode. So we would like to start by asking you this question, sir. What are habits and how are they formed?
Yes, indeed, that's a fantastic question. What are habits and how are they formed? Of course, I will not attempt to give a dictionary definition. I would answer that question within the context of your initial commentary on goals, right? So I would say that habits are essentially routine. They are things that we do repeatedly, and this could be good or could be bad. I mean, they could be positive or they could be negative. So the best way to understand habits is to look at goals. But the best way to understand goals is to look at what we call dreams, visions, and perhaps to also situate them within what we call resolutions. And I decided to scale back so that we can build an understanding. This is still the beginning of the year, pretty much. And it's typically that time of the year when a lot of us have this renewed sense of hope, a renewed sense of things can change, we can do things differently. And then the word that typically comes to mind are resolutions, right? And resolutions, the way I like to describe them, are like intentions. They are like a decision kind of that we make to change something, all right? Now, situating resolutions side by side with goals would mean that goals are somewhat a bit deeper than resolutions. Goals are a commitment to do something or change something, but particularly within a time period. And they perhaps also relate to a dream or a vision of a future that we see or we have. So, and how does all of this relate to habits? Now, having that sense of a renewed vision for your future, say at the beginning of a year, and setting goals to achieve that vision will then necessarily entail the formation of habits if those goals must succeed. This is what I mean. And I would use a very practical example. We have the African Cup of Nations currently ongoing. I believe that every team that signed up or qualified for that competition have it somewhere at the back of their minds to win the trophy. They came to win. I don't think any team, I really don't think any team came there just to show up. I don't think Egypt, Algeria, or any of these guys, came there like, oh, let's just come, right? Everybody came to win. But in a couple of days, there will be a winner. Now, and it will be a mix of many factors, but the real question is this: why is it that we set such goals? Everybody came to win, but only one person would win. Typically, the reason is based on that word habits. Everybody came to win, but not everyone would win. The team that will win, when you scale it back, they will win because of the habits they had formed over time. This is what I mean. A writer I respect so much said, we really do not rise to the level of our goals or our dreams or our visions. We fall or we rise to the level of the systems we put in place. So I've introduced another word. Habits are the systems, they are the processes that we put in place to ensure that we achieve our goals, right? So what makes them habits is the fact that you do them consistently. So the team that will win the Nations Cup is the team that has a consistent habit of doing the things that make winners. And there are many things, all right? So your next question is, how do we form these habits? How do we entrench these habits? And I think the easier way to explain that and to answer that question of habit formation is to understand that at the end of the day, we are all humans, but we live a life that is driven by habits. Think about it. And actually, this is scientifically proven. 40% of the things you do every day, you did not consciously think about it. You just did those things from when you woke up. It's almost like you're an autopilot. So whether you know it or not, the things that you do every day pretty much are things that you just do by default. You had formed those habits unconsciously just by repeating them. And so it even starts from the way you sleep. You probably sleep on one side, facing one side or one direction, whether left or right. And you've been doing it consistently. and you don't know, but that's what you do. You wake up. I hope this is not you listening to me. The first thing you probably do is pull out your phone and you check social media, right? And by default, that's what you do. Eventually, you stand up, you brush, you do a few things. If you are going to school, you pick up uniform. There's a time you leave. I mean, pretty much your life is actually routine habits. So this question is then, if I want my life to move in a more positive direction, for instance, I say this year, I intend to set a few goals, right? I want to be more spiritually mature. This year, I want to be more physically fit. This year, I want to be more mentally mature, healthy, right? It then means that you will consciously change those things that you do by default, right? And so that's it pretty much. You make a conscious decision that rather than waking up and open my phone to check social media, the first thing I will do, hopefully if you're spiritually inclined, is I will look into God's word, right? So that's a decision because you have a goal. You want to become a spiritually matured person. You change the things you do. So I'm trusting that as we continue in this conversation, I will share more insight on, that, but pretty much just laid it out. It's a decision, and it's consciously, unconsciously, we are creatures of habits.
Thank you very much, sir. That was a very insightful one. And there are a few things I've picked out from this particular answers that this particular answer that you've given. I see that you mentioned systems. I also see that you mentioned routines. You also mentioned building positive habits, and you talked about waking up in the morning, and instead of starting out by clinging to your phone, you start out with something more meaningful, which is talking to your maker, and then to doing certain things that are really more important to our lives. My next question would then be, starting out with systems, how can a person, what are the things to actually look out for, to determine that, okay, this is a good system that can really keep me in check and help me to live out these positive habits? What are those things to look out for? Is there like a checklist that you recommend, to look out for when picking out a good system?
Fantastic. So, I mean, recognizing that we started out by saying habits are typically the pathway to achieving your goals, right? So you have this dream, and the dream is, let's say, okay, I mean, teenagers listening to us, let's scale it down a little bit. Let's say you have this goal to learn a new skill, maybe play an instrument, a musical instrument, right? Or you have, okay, say something more fun, a goal to learn how to drive. Perhaps you're in your later teenage years. Or perhaps you are looking to saving up to getting something, right? Now, these are things you can relate to it. Now, but tying them to more meaningful life goals. I mean, I can only come in from the spiritual end here, right? To say, first of all, this pursuit that I have, does it honor God? I think that's your first question, right? Two, is it motivated by love, right? Or is it just about me, myself, and I, right? Will this thing require me to trust God? Will it require me to depend on God? So I think that first of all, those are the basics, right? Now, we now come into what are the systems? What are those things that you need to keep in at the top of your mind when creating new habits? I think the first thing you want to have top of mind is that whatever habit you want to start, you want to make it obvious, right? And this is what I mean. Say you have a goal of becoming fit, physically fit. One of the things that will make that goal obvious is perhaps you have running shoes, right? You put that shoes the night before at a place where you can see it. Now, you wake up in the morning, you come into the room, or you wake up, you stand up from your bed and you see those shoes. That's a cue. That tells you, all right, I need to get out there and walk or jog or run. All right. So it sounds counterintuitive, but that's a system. Two, you make it easy. So say it's a goal to read the Bible for the whole year. You don't start by saying, I'm going to do 3 chapters. You just start by saying, I would read 5 verses. So you make it easy so that it's not overwhelming. Or say you decide, I'm going to write a book. All right. You start by journaling, by just pretty much documenting everything that happens to you every day. So the goal is not, oh, I want to write a book, what I intend to achieve. No, the goal is, who do you want to become? All right. And who you want to become is, I want to become a writer. Okay. So that's where you start from, who you want to become. So if you say, who do I want to become? Again, I want to become a writer. Then the next question is, what do writers do? Writers have a consistent discipline of writing. All right. So the identity then shapes the habits, and it applies to everything. Who do you want to become? I want to become a leader who unlocks potential in other people. Then you reverse engineer that to say, what do someone like that do every day? Someone who wants to become a leader that unlocks potential in others every day will add value to himself or herself. All right. And adding value means reading, studying. Every day, such a person would add value to others. All right. So it starts with that mindset. Who do you want to be? I want to be an A grade student. What does an A grade student do every day? An A grade student will ensure that every day he or she gives premium attention to his studies, to her studies. All right. So essentially what I've said is, yes, there are systems. You make it easy, right? You make it obvious, right? But it actually starts with the identity. What do you see? Then you reverse engineer it and you break it into a daily habit. So that's a framework that works in habit creation and in sustaining habits. And I say this from the point of view that when we take that word resolutions, which is making a resolve to change something, to do something, and you do not consciously transform that resolution into a goal and a habit-based goal, it doesn't last. And the statistics are out there. 92% of resolutions fail by the end of January. It is proven, all right? And the reason is because that resolution has not been transformed into a habit-based goal. So let me say a little bit about the goal. The business people will tell you that the goal ought to be smart. It ought to be measurable, right? It ought to be, is it achievable? It ought to be relevant. It ought to be time bound. I add that it ought to be exciting, and perhaps it also ought to be risky. All right. Now, so I want to be a writer. That's an identity, right? You now fit it into a goal. What do writers do, right? They write consistently, okay? Then you now form that into a goal. All right, I want to put out a journal in 1 year. I break it down, measurable, into something that is achievable, that is realistic within the space of 1 week, within a space of 1 month. All right. And then I measure it. I evaluate at the end of each month. How am I doing? So 1 month means it's time bound. Exciting, it's also important, especially for teens. You want something that is fun, not just challenging. All right. And that's where that idea of there are certain things that you are wired and configured to do more easily. All right. You might not know it at the snap of a finger, but it comes with exposure, exposing yourself to different exciting things. All right. And then you just find that some things come easier to you. Right. And then it's risky. Risky means you trust God, right? If you can achieve it by yourself and with your own efforts alone, then perhaps it's too small. All right. But risky, and I don't mean reckless, I mean risky. Risky means you need to stretch yourself. It will stretch you. Okay. So, I mean, these are parameters, these are frameworks to turn that dream, that vision, into habit-based goals. And these are not just pie in the sky resolutions, all right? But these are things that could actually be meaningful and it could change your life. And where did I start from? I said it should honor God. It should be something done out of love. So that means it's not just selfish, all right? Why do you want to be fit? Yes, there's that self-serving part of it. You want to look good, right? You want to look attractive, and that's okay, all right? But let it also be that you want to honor God, because your body is the temple of God's Spirit, all right? Now, because you want to honor God, that is a goal that goes beyond yourself. Then you can trust Him. You can rely on the Holy Spirit to help you. But if it is just something that is fixed on your own vanity, all right, it may when the first challenge comes, you may not have what it takes, right, to resist. So I've said a bit, but as we go along, I believe I'll also touch on habits that you should stop as well. I mean, I've focused a lot on habits that you should start, but there's also that part of having to stop habits. But let me turn it to Akin to take the bit forward. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was a very insightful session. That was a very insightful answer as well. I mean, there were a lot of quotes. There were a lot of principles that I picked and I've written down. But then I want to go to this very important question, which I think might be burning on the hearts of everyone, which is that at the beginning of every year you set out goals for every area of your life, and that is a given because we don't just have our spiritual life, we don't just have finances alone to take care of. We have to be very meticulous about every area of our life, including our academics, including our career, including relationships with people. Now these are all goals that we set. When we set these goals, you talked about the fact that we should try as much as possible to avoid it being overwhelming, as that is part of building a good system and structure for a positive habit. But then
Right.
when coming up with this our magical goals and strategies for the year, we have to just write down at least between 3 to 5 on the minimum of things that we want to achieve in these areas of our life. And to be honest, in my own experience, one area will always suffer. Right. For example, if I say I want to read the Bible through, before the end of the year, and I'm going to school, by the time the workload at school, overwhelms me, I'm already tired. I'm like, oh, I can't focus on this Bible. So how do you balance or harmonize these different areas of your life and still build a very positive habit around them, and yet you're not burning out?
Great question, Akin. Fantastic question. And then you laid it out beautifully, right? The truth is, our lives are in different domains. For teenagers, you might at least have 5 areas of your life, right? Your spiritual walk with God, your physical health, right? Your mental and emotional side, right? Relational, whether with your siblings, your family, and even with folks who are beyond your family. And who knows, you might also already have the financial part of your life. But perhaps more importantly is the academic part of your life, which would then eventually transform into a career or a vocation. All right. And so, yes, the question is really about how do you set goals in all of this area? Because to live a well-rounded life, to live a balanced life, you ought to have goals in all of these areas so that one does not suffer. You don't want to be great academically and then you are suffering financially. I mean, you don't want to be awesome in your physical health and then mentally or emotionally you are always downtrodden, beaten and all. So yes, now typically you would look at, all right, I want to set goals in at least 4 or 5 of these areas as a teenager. Now the counsel is this: you don't want to burn out, all right? So you would look at all of these areas and say, hey, which area is most important? I can't speak for every teenager, but I can almost immediately point to your spiritual health, right? I can sum the physical, mental, and emotional health as one as well. And then I can immediately point to your academics, okay? But in the same vein, I should look at your social health as well, right? Your relationship with people. So this is what I advise. Life comes in different seasons. This season of your life, particularly as teenagers, I imagine that the greater emphasis would be on 2 areas: your spiritual work, your relationship with God, and your academics. I think that those 2 would come first for most people, right? Some may argue that mental health, is really critical, or social interactions, okay? But at least those 2. It's a season, all right? And give them priority. There's a concept in habit formation that is known as Keystone habits. This means that you look at one key area, perhaps it's your relationship with God, and you give that priority. And most often, you would find that if you get that right, it has a way of impacting the other areas of your life. All right. Now, I will give my personal example. I decided that I will add just one life-giving habit per year. Every year, I will just do one thing differently, and I will do it consistently. So about 4 years ago, I decided that for the first time, I would read the Bible from the beginning to the end. And I realized that, all right, the best way for me to do it was to listen to the audio Bible. So that was a habit I was going to form. And I started on the 1st of January of that year. Now, I realized that so first of all, touching on one of the concepts I mentioned earlier, which is make it obvious, make it easy. I realized that I had to tie that habit of listening to the Bible to something that I already do naturally, which in this case was to brush my teeth. So the minute I pick my toothbrush, that was my cue that I needed to listen to the Bible. Now, I realized that this was going to take me about 45 minutes to do. So I reconfigured my life such that immediately I finished brushing, maybe that's about 5 minutes and all, I still have about 40 minutes. So I decided while I'm listening to the Bible, I would go on a walk or a jog. All right. So what that meant was that I took a decision that then immediately impacted on my physical health, because for the next 40 minutes, I'm listening to the Bible, I'm taking a walk. Now, listening to the Bible was a keystone habit, one habit that had an impact on my physical health. Not only that, it had an impact on my mental health, because by the time I come back, I feel so relaxed. I'm ready to take on the challenge of the day. All right. And so, in the same way, you can just take one goal, reverse engineer it into one habit. I want to be a writer. And what is one habit I must do? I must write a journal, write 2 lines every day. All right. That's enough. Okay. Now, if you write in your journal every day, what you are saying to yourself is that I am a disciplined person, and it will have an impact in your academics, because the same way you give yourself to writing in your journal every day, you will give yourself to studying, right, to revising your schoolwork every day, because you have configured yourself to be, I am a disciplined person. Okay, so that singular habit could have a way of impacting all these other areas of your life. And finally, you have the whole of your life ahead of you. You can take a cue from what I said. Don't be in a rush. Focus on another area in the next year of your life. And then just repeat every year. Focus. You might decide that I'm going to save this next year. So that's your financial life. It's not that you throw every other area of your life away. The habits you had built in the last 1 year, you continue. You just keep adding every year. By the time you are my age, you would have built a stack of life-giving habits. And in fact, your life would have been completely transformed. That is how life change happens. That is how the people, and I have used journaling as an example, all right? A research was carried out. Everybody who transformed industry, the Steve Jobs, the Zuckerbergs, the Gates, within the last half century, it was actually found that they have a particular habit that they do every day. And for most of them, one of the habits is journaling, just writing every day. All right. So, that's just an example that research has shown. So don't be in a hurry. Okay. Just add one small discipline every year. All right. But ensure that it is something you can do little by little every day. I would like to close this thought with an anecdote. Every life-giving habit you add always looks so difficult at inception. And in fact, it always looks as if nothing is changing over a period of time. You see, the truth is, when you boil water, it starts from 0 degrees. It keeps rising. It keeps rising. It keeps getting hotter. 1 degree, you are adding it. It gets up to, in Fahrenheit, it gets up to 211. It's very hot, but it just needs 1 more degree to become 212. Then it starts to boil. Someone says, oh, the water is boiling. You're an overnight success. No, you are not. Every single degree from 0 counted until it became 212 degree and it started to boil. The reverse is the case for destructive habits. It always looks as if it brings an immediate return immediately. Think about it. Any destructive habit, there's a dopamine hit, that's a hormone, but in the long run, it destroys. So remember that a life-giving habit, you are exercising in the first 30 days, nothing changes, all right? Or it seems as if nothing is changing, but keep at it. You will build a lifestyle of health because you kept on doing it. And then you would look back, and the same applies to any life-giving habits that you choose. So, I mean, I hope that was helpful.
Yes, it was. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, sir. This question, sir, I would like us to talk about how to stop bad habits, because just the same way good habits are formed, bad habits too are formed, and they all start by taking actions, right? How can people stop destructive habits? What deliberate steps can they put in place to ensure that they don't keep going back to their vomit, or keep going back to that negative habit?
Fantastic. Fantastic. And of course, I'm not going to, okay, well, I was going to say I would not mention some of those extreme habits, but I can mention a few that most people don't think about. Some of it is attitudinal, right? For instance, we all know people that are just critical. They have nothing good to say. A complaining heart, a critical spirit, a gossiping tongue, all right? So I mean, I think those are things that can immediately hit home. But there are other things like overeating. I mean, taking too much fast food rather than eating healthy. Then there's the digital side of things, spending too much time on social media, video games, or binge watching Netflix, or the more destructive one, addiction to porn, right? Or even substance abuse. Some people are addicted to alcohol, to prescription drugs, even to sugar, all right? Now, like most people will testify, just willpower is not enough, because several times folks say, okay, I make a resolve to stop this, and they just find out that they go back to it, all right? And that's because, and there's a scientific reason for it actually, a habit loop has already been formed, right? The psychologists have explained this. There's a trigger, there's an action, and there's a reward. There's all, for every bad habit, and actually it's same for good habits, there's a cue. So like I mentioned, I put out my running shoes. When I see that shoe, that's my cue. Oh, you have to run. In the same way, there are triggers for bad habits. Think about it. It's either a particular place, or a particular time, or a particular mood, or a particular moment, or being around a particular set of people. It triggers something, all right? And when we say place, there are certain places you go to, and once you are there, all restraints are cut off. When we say mood, think about it. When you are hungry, or you are angry, or you are lonely, or you are tired, there are certain things that come to you almost quote and unquote naturally, right? There are some other things that you do as a result of certain things, certain moments that happen in your life. For instance, you have an argument with a close friend or something, and then you just want to get over it, and then you turn your attention to certain destructive thing. Or there are certain people, right, that trigger certain kind of habits. So I took my time to go into this detail because the solution, and I mean, of course, especially teenagers, when we say certain people, this is scripture, 1 Corinthians 15:33. Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. All right. I love the way Proverbs say it, but in my own paraphrase, show me your friend and I'll tell you what you would become. All right. So the first thing is remove the trigger. Remove the trigger. Remove the trigger. Another way of saying remove the trigger is make that thing more difficult to do. So it's almost a case of why do you want to resist the temptation when you can eliminate it in the first place? All right. So remove the trigger. There are certain places that you should avoid. There are certain actions or decisions you should not take when you are angry or when you are in a bad mood or when you feel weak or tired or lonely. All right. So, I mean, it sounds counterintuitive, but that's the one thing I want to leave with everyone that is listening to me. Remove the trigger and then interrupt the action. So what does that mean? Again, do not underestimate the fact that willpower cannot help you when it comes to stopping a bad habit, okay? Willpower just cannot stop. So if, for instance, you know someone who is addicted to looking at the wrong things, there might just be a way you place your laptop or your computer that will change that disposition. So for most people who look at destructive things on their system, their systems are usually hidden away from public view. So you just might need to take a decision and say, you know what, I will turn my system into a public facing view so that whoever is coming behind me can see what I am doing. And I mean, it's a decision you have taken, but it's a life-changing decision. You spend too much time on Amazon, for instance. You can give a friend your password, right? To say, hey, if I get to such and such level, cut me off. You have a tendency to look at inappropriate images on your phone. Install filters. I mean, there's someone I respect so much, a wonderful man of God. He says every time he travels out of his state, out of his country, he has a close friend who he says, call me at 9 o'clock and find out where I am. Right? You know, so that's putting controls in place. I'm not saying that, oh, I'm all that and nothing, you know, can go wrong. I can handle it. All right. So the question is, why resist the temptation tomorrow if I have the power to eliminate it today? All right. So it's as simple as if I don't like the direction a particular habit is taking me, I remove the trigger and interrupt the action. So I think that if listeners can just remember that, and with some of the examples, you will find that those are practical ways to break habits. Remember that observe that I deliberately did not go into the spiritual side of things, all right? Because that's a given. You trust God for strength, you trust Him for His power, all right? And you rely on His Spirit. It is the wisdom that comes from God that I have learned in my life and I have seen other people apply that I have shared tonight. And these are practical steps that one can take to ensure that you do not get caught and then destroyed by bad habits.
Wow. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much. This was very insightful. The last question for you, sir, is that do you have any books or maybe podcasts or perhaps even YouTube channels or articles that you would recommend for teenagers to take or to study or to listen to that can really help their growth, especially relating to building positive habits in their lives?
Fantastic. And one of the first books I read that kind of changed my life. It was written by I think it was Stephen Covey, if I'm not mistaken, right? Now, however, Stephen Covey actually then had a son who wrote a scaled down version of that book. That book is called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That book changed my life. All 7 habits. Now, his son, I think his name is Sean Covey, Sean, then adapted that book for teenagers, 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. I think every teenager should read that book. All right. Now, however, specifically on the subject of habit and much of the things that you heard me say on this podcast today, I learned them from books such as The Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg, Atomic Habits by James Clear, and in fact, another book called Compound Effects by Darren Hardy. All right. So those are books that would give you the 411, on much of what I have said tonight. But I think that book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens, would be my number 1 recommendation. Now, after you have read that book, then read the original one written by the dad, because I read that book as a teenager, the original one, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. In fact, I think that's the first book I read ever. All right. And I have not stopped since. In terms of podcast, honestly, I would say just stay with this particular podcast, All Things Teens, because what this podcast will do for you is that it will bring all of those resources from everywhere and bring it in one place for you. But as time goes on, you will then begin to have exposure into other podcasts. But I will give you a guiding parameter. Don't become limited. Don't listen to podcasts or read books just in one domain of your life. Read books that build you up spiritually, or listen to podcasts that help you build spiritual health. Books that build up your mental health, your emotional health, books on physical health, books on finances, books on relationships. All right. So just be sure that whether it's the books or the podcast, you go all round. And in the same way, when you are seeking mentors, do not have mentors just in one area, because you'll quickly find out that as great as your mentors are, as long as they are human beings and they are living, there is no perfect person. And they might be great in an area and struggle in other areas. So do not hero worship anybody. All right. Yes, your mentors should show example, and your mentors should model a well-rounded life. But as long as they are human, they will not be all that. So it will be great to ensure that you have mentors, you read, and you get experiences from people in different areas of life. All right. So that keeps you well-rounded, that keeps you balanced. So again, I hope that was helpful.
Yes, it was. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you so very much. This has really been an engaging session, an insightful one at that. And I want to really say a big thank you for taking time out, despite your busy schedule, to engage us on this critical subject. We are very grateful, sir. Thank you so much. I also want to believe that every of our listener really understood what was discussed today and picked out, action points or things that they will start doing differently to really shape their lives in a very positive way. Please, if you do have questions, you can actually send them to our email, allthingsthenpodcast@gmail.com, or better still, you can drop it in the community page, right? And at that place, you're going to have answers to your questions. Thank you very much. A big thank you to our team of volunteers. We are very grateful. You're greatly celebrated. And thank you for everyone who is listening. Thank you for always tuning in. Y'all are the best. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. If you have been blessed by this topic, please share with your friends and also drop reviews on the community page or our email. You can also share with us burdens on your heart or topics you would want us to talk about. Feel free to give to promote the spread of this podcast by partnering with us on our website at allthingsthenpodcast.disha.page. Thank you for your constant support. See you next week.